Okay, so this panel is called Visionary Business Leaders. The reason it's called that is that everybody in this panel is taking a leadership role in terms of moving this agenda forward. Career development, career readiness, the skills needed for success in today's workforce. They're doing many different things, but what they share in common is a commitment to this cause. So moderating our panel today, we have Sandra Watson. She's head of the Arizona Commerce Authority, leading the efforts here in Arizona. Then to my right, we have Curtis Reed. He's the manager for J.P. Morgan Chase, both for Arizona and Nevada. He's going to be speaking about the leadership that J.P. Morgan is providing not only here, but nationally. Then we have Bob Meyer. He's the CEO of Phoenix Children's Hospital, really a leader in the healthcare community in terms of trying to make young people aware of the tremendous opportunities in healthcare. Here we have Erica Kashiri from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. She's going to be talking about the very innovative work the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is doing in terms of talent pipeline management and also youth unemployment. Then over here we have John Graham, CEO of Sunbelt Holdings. He's going to be talking about the work he's leading in the Phoenix area around velocity, and he'll tell you all about that. And then finally, we have Delia Garcia from Wal-Mart, and she's going to be talking about the tremendous commitment Wal-Mart is making to increase career opportunity for retail associates. So please join me in welcoming this outstanding panel.
Thank you, Bill. And so I'm going to start off with a few opening remarks, and then I'm going to ask each of the panel members to give us about a 5-minute opening remarks, and then we'll get into a panel discussion. So good morning, everyone. It is an absolute honor to be here to discuss career pathways with this amazing group of visionary business leaders. We will be talking about current trends and challenges facing our workforce on the national level, educational shortcomings that have been seen across the country, promising best practices being developed and implemented right here in Arizona, and actions that we can take to secure a long-term success and give future generations an opportunity to attain and live the American dream. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 5.4 million job openings in the United States at the end of February. 5.4 million job openings in February. A recent Manpower Group talent shortage survey indicated that 52% of companies reported difficulty filling those jobs. 47% of employers blame candidates, lack of hard and technical skills. 35% of companies cite the candidate's lack of experience. And 25% of companies blame the lack of business knowledge or formal qualifications. Employment projections from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics indicate that while occupations that typically require a bachelor's degree will account for 21% of new jobs, just under 3/4 of the new jobs will require an associate degree or less. More than 1/4 of new jobs in the fast-growing IT sector will be in occupations that typically require a level of education below a bachelor's degree. While the pathways to these careers are multiple, we must ensure that common thread in our emerging workforce is a firm mastery of the fundamentals, universal competencies required in the workplace. That is why a vision and strategic plan identifying path for our youth is so vital to the future economic well-being, not only of this state, but of the nation. Educators and workforce development practitioners need to work with our local businesses, connecting them to the education experts and assets to make sure that our training is providing opportunities for the youth and allowing them and providing them with the skills that will prepare them for the real world. The Arizona Commerce Authority, and specifically our workforce development team, has a mission to support a skilled and available workforce and contribute to the high value-based sectors in our great state. moving us towards the best location in the U.S. to work, live, play, grow a business, and get an education. Our work team is in alignment with Governor Ducey's vision of a job-driven public workforce system that focuses equally on employment needs of job seekers and employers' needs of skilled labor. In engaging our state's business community on an unprecedented level to gain their perspective on the real-world skills demanded by today's rapidly growing workforce. We have engaged leaders from the most critical industries in the various regions of our state in industry sector partnerships. These partnerships start with summits in which employers are asked to provide their perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing their sector. Solution providers, education, and workforce professionals partner and join in this effort to craft the relevant solutions, a customized and specialized approach for every industry. Our team supports 14 of these partnerships in 8 industries across the state, ranging from viticulture to aerospace manufacturing. And I'm proud to report that the Aspen Institute's Communities That Work Partnership program, a collaboration with the Federal Economic Development Administration, selected our work with the Arizona IT Sector Partnership as one of 7 sector-based initiatives nationally that are participating in an accelerated learning exchange. The effort will benchmark best practices and provide assistance to emerging partnerships throughout the country. Collaboration, as you know, and innovation are key to the success of our state, so our workforce team partners with a number of organizations to accomplish our goals, including the Center for the Future of Arizona, the Global Pathways Institute, the Arizona Technology Council, the Maricopa Community College's Business and Industry Leadership Team, and the Arizona Quality Skills Commission. Each of these organizations work in different ways to ensure that vibrant career paths are being developed to facilitate growth of our emerging high school and college graduates into high-quality careers. Arizona's education and training strategies become more fundamentally aligned to the exciting opportunities available in today's emerging workforce. Our state will become even better positioned as the destination of choice for businesses that are seeking a diverse, abundant, and highly skilled workforce. The visionary leaders on this panel will provide perspective on important initiatives to growing our state's prosperity for 2 primary reasons. Number 1, the decision is responsive to the fact that the U.S. needs an education system that is adaptable and keeps pace with a changing world economy. The efforts in kindergarten through the 12th grade and higher education needs to fit with the needs of the business and industry, creating real career pathways in our state that meet the needs of our workforce and provide meaningful, lucrative futures for Arizona students. So that, as a backdrop to this panel discussion, I'd like to invite each of our panel members to provide a 5-minute introductory remarks on their exciting initiatives. And we'll go ahead and start with you, Curtis. You can... Okay, perfect. Okay.
Bring the microphone over.
Perfect.
Good morning, everybody. So, at JP Morgan Chase, we consider it a core responsibility of ours to help our communities globally as well as locally. We see ourselves as part of the solution when we face economic and social challenges. The reality is there's some stark things that are happening that we feel that really need to be fixed. So if you look just over the last year, 2015, middle-class families for the first time have become the minority. While the average American's income has increased more than a third since 1970, the vast majority of that increase has gone to upper-income households. According to the Pew Research Center, middle-class families have seen their median incomes decline by 4% since 2000. And low-income families who, are struggling to make ends meet have seen their incomes decline by 9%. So these are very challenging trends that we believe we both have a moral and economic imperative for the entire nation, and we believe that the private sector has an obligation to change these trends. Some may ask whether a global bank has a role to play in addressing these challenges. I say the answer is emphatically yes. Over the next 5 years, we're going to deploy upwards of $1 billion towards programs focused on expanding access to opportunity and advancing economic mobility around the world. Unlike traditional models of corporate philanthropy, we are going to rely on robust data and research that comes directly from over 50 million households. We've analyzed financial data and also analysis of real-time labor market dynamics in order to make sure that we're investing in the right solutions that will have the right outcomes. Clearly, when we think about the challenges that the economy face in terms of trying to close the skill gap, there's a number of critical areas that need to be focused on. When you think about the employer who is looking to fill different roles, and many of them find it challenging to find the skilled labor, we ask ourselves, are there opportunities for them to do a better job in terms of providing training or providing other resources to those employees looking for work? When it comes to the employee, are there things that they can be trained better on to fit the new age jobs that are available? And then when you look at the four-year institutions and technical training and community colleges, are there ways that they can adapt to this new dilemma and provide the right training to prospective employees to find those jobs? At JP Morgan Chase, we have over 14,000 middle market companies that we bank. We have upwards of 4 million small businesses that we bank. And every year we poll our customers and ask them what their view is of the economy. And generally speaking, there's a level of optimism that's out there. But admittedly this year, optimism on the economy broadly did dip a little bit. But one of the areas that there is constant feedback on is this notion of not being able to find the right employees to fit the jobs that they're looking for. In fact, a record number of business leaders reported this year that the biggest challenge is limited supply of talent. Upwards of 40% of the respondents said that is the biggest challenge that they face. In the Midwest, if you look regionally, this challenge is even starker. Their concern is upwards of 48% of respondents saw this as an issue. And then from an industry perspective, construction, 63%, and services, 50% reported that most challenges stemming from a limited supply of talent. Overall, 69% of total respondents are very concerned or somewhat concerned about a limited supply of candidates with the right skill set to fit their needs. So this is very stark. And so JP Morgan Chase, both on a local level and national level, we want to make the right commitments with investments with organizations that are doing work to help close the skill gap. So here in Arizona, we're working with organizations like Goodwill, Year Up, United Way, the Center for Arizona, and others to help, again, to close this skill gap. Nationally, we've launched New Skills at Work, which is a 5-year, $250 million initiative starting in 2013, working with cities to try to find and provide data to help them find employees that are looking for the jobs that are available and help employers do a better job of connecting with those employees. We've also launched, most recently, New Skills at Youth program, which is a $75 million 5-year global initiative, really looking to tackle what we believe is a significant issue with our youth in terms of helping develop the right pathways for them, both to find good potential education as well as available jobs. We also, just because I'm very proud of this, we are part of what was called the $100,000 Veterans Job Mission. We were one of the founding companies for that, which is now a million jobs mission. And to date, we've hired over 10,000 veterans since 2010. And here in Arizona, we've hired 850 veterans, which is upwards of 10% of the total number we've hired. So very proud of that. But look forward to having this discussion on this important topic around how do we close the skills gap, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Curtis. And Bob, I'll have you make some introductory remarks.
Again, good morning. I became quite interested in this whole idea of developing jobs, skill sets, et cetera, because I run a very, very complex organization. Healthcare, if you go out and do the polls, number one concern of all healthcare CEOs is workforce shortages. And none have been more evident than Arizona over time. We actually had a major initiative through the Arizona Hospital Association a number of years ago to double the number of nursing slots, which is a very interesting task. I had no idea what we were up against. When we got into it, I learned all about the Arizona Board of Regents, differential tuition, and the fact that they don't like differential tuition. Hospitals were willing to pay more to get the nurses we needed, but there was a cultural, political issue involved with that. They didn't have any faculty. We had to come up with nursing professors. And actually, we developed an entire advertising program to go into the schools, high schools, to educate students, high school students, about what these various opportunities are. It's quite interesting. We took our employees, medical equipment, et cetera, went into schools, did advertising, et cetera. But a lot of this goes back to this general concept that I think business and educational activities need to be in lockstep. We got to develop these things together because our workforce needs, what we're looking for, changes. So just a little perspective of Phoenix Children's. The 30th largest employer in Arizona. We have 5,000 employees, all kinds of things from, we employ 500 physicians, the ultimate of educational, if you want to go there, a lot of nurses. But we also employ a lot of plumbers, electricians, HVAC, you name it. We've got a whole bunch of associate degree people, both in our IT. We've got 300 information technology professionals that work for us. So it's a wide range of skill sets, a wide range of educational opportunities. We've also been very aggressive in starting programs. So if you were to go back to this journey on nursing, is a good example. What's very different about Arizona is 80% of our nursing grads were two-year degree. National average is about 50 BSN versus associate degree. Some states, Iowa, Ohio, are as high as 70% BSNs. So we needed to also have a progression model through everything that we did. How do we take associate degree nurses, RNs, to BSN, to MSN, et cetera? We developed a very unique and aggressive business-to-business relationship with Grand Canyon University, where we assisted in the curriculum, development of the curriculum. All the tuition is paid directly by Phoenix Children's to Grand Canyon. So we don't put the nurse in the middle where they have to go put it on their credit card. We wanted to get every barrier you could out of tuition reimbursement. The good news is that 20% of associate degree nurses at Phoenix Children's is now 56% BSN. And those are the kinds of things that we proactively wanted to get involved in. The next step in the development of that system today is pediatric fellowships. So we now have fellowship programs for fourth-year BSN students at both ASU and Grand Canyon to get very specific, intensive pediatric fellowships. Obviously, it's self-serving. We hope to hire them all when they're done. So again, I think it's a very interesting approach where business can become very proactively involved in these educational. We also, outside of all of that I talked about with nursing, we sent out over $2 million in tuition reimbursement to other employees outside of nursing, whether it's people that want to get their MBAs, their bachelors in information technology, whatever it happens to be, things that benefit us. So I think you can see business can really spend a lot of time working with educational communities. And this is what I do with Greater Phoenix Leadership, as Jim Zaharis knows, and others. We're very interested in CTE. But there's a lot of opportunity when you go back to different pathways, is how you can get there. We use a pathway, like I said, an associate 2-year nurse degree to start a whole relationship that we hope will ultimately end up in a master's of science in nursing, or on the management side, a master's of nursing administration. So again, a lot of proactive approach to all of this, because that is the biggest single issue that we have. And like I said, I don't forget all the other things we have too. We need all those plumbers, electricians, et cetera. I've got 2 million square feet in 38 different sites of buildings we have to maintain. You know, you ask, why do you care about plumbers, et cetera? I guarantee you, they're not easy to find and not good ones. And so I'm very interested in the CTE stuff and everything else that we have. One of our highest paying jobs, interestingly enough, is an associate level degree, which is a biomedical engineer. And what do? They fix imaging equipment. They fix echo machines, et cetera. So a lot of opportunities in healthcare, and I think it's true in a lot of business, but what we've really tried is that partnership with the educational facilities, and it's really paid off for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And Erica.
All right, good morning. Can everyone hear me? So I work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. For those of you who don't know, we are the nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So of course we are interested, given our constituency, about what this means for business. And if business is saying there's a skills gap, then we're interested in figuring out how to fill it. I love that there's a survey that was done before this panel, so I know sort of the group that we're working with right here, and I'm preaching to the choir. So I'm going to make it short and sweet and say there are jobs without people, and there are people without jobs. So how do we basically close this gap? So in 2014, we actually launched what we called a Talent Pipeline Management Initiative. And the idea behind it was we spent a lot of time building capacity on the supply side, right? Spent a lot of time making sure the teachers are right and the students have what they need to really progress. But we don't spend as much time thinking about, okay, well, how do we build capacity for employers to engage? If we want them to take a leadership role in this space, how do we give them what they need to do this? And what was great is that we've kind of moved from this space where we point fingers, right? Usually you bring people into a room from different stakeholders and you say, who's to blame for the skills gap? And immediately everyone sort of looks at their neighbor, right, and is like, well, it's definitely not me. And what's crazy is that you have groups that should be on the same side who are like immediately throwing each other on the bus. At least in my naive maybe world, I think we've moved past that and really moved towards solutions. So for us, we're like, okay, well then how do we give employers what they need to take this leadership role? Doing much they do already when it comes to supply chain management. So we're taking a lot of lessons learned from supply chain management. Employers aren't like, well, whatever product my suppliers give me, I'm going to be okay with it. It doesn't matter the quality. That's an absolutely no. I mean, Twitter, right? It takes one bad tweet and companies are scrambling to do damage control. They are in every part when it comes to their supply chains, but why are they not when it comes to their talent? And that's what we really wanted to investigate. So we had 7 communities that were selected, starting a couple of years ago, actually maybe a year and a half ago, to really investigate this and to implement 6 strategies, again, kind of derived from supply chain management, starting from making an employer collaborative. So this is where you have groups of employers, by employers, for employers. Really make sure this is a demand-driven approach as much as it can possibly be. Also doing things like talent flow analysis, understanding their competencies and credentials, all those nitty-gritty things that they do with their supply chains. Again, it's a team sport, right? They do this with supply chains. How do they not do this with their talent? And we learned a lot of lessons from this. And we decided, okay, well, if we learned so many lessons, why not grow the network a bit? So we did get a grant from USA Funds, we thank them for this, to start a TPM Academy. And this is really focused on bringing in these business leaders and teaching them these approaches. And I keep saying over and over again, really building that capacity on the demand side for them to really engage in this work. So we're excited about that work. It will start in the fall. But we did learn a lot of lessons along the way when we were doing Talent Pipeline Management Initiative. And a lot of it is around youth. I mean, youth have their unique challenges. When you shine a magnifying glass on 16 to 24-year-olds, there are some unique things that deserved our attention. So it's a little spin-off from Talent Pipeline Management. We decided to go ahead and say, okay, But what does this mean for youth? What does this mean for youth employment? Usually we think about youth employment, right, basically after point of hire. That's when employers engage. We're saying, okay, well, if we're talking about leadership along, we call it the employer value stream, another kind of word basically for career pathway. We want to basically have employers engage along the entire career pathway. And how do we do that? So we decided to leverage our network of chambers. It's great to tap them. I think one or two might be here at this event, which I'm really excited about. What they are doing, they're all doing different strategies, but they have a piece of it that's really focused on that capacity building piece around youth employment. This could be serving as almost a new age staffing agency where they are that intermediary between the business and the talent that is out there. We will continue working with them over the next year. I see I have 1 minute left, but again, our idea is really that if this skills gap is real, how do we really push for employers to take a leadership role in this space? And happy to talk more about exactly what the chambers are doing in the next round of questioning.
Thank you, Erica. And John.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start with just a couple things to give you some relevance to the comments that I'll make. And so basically the business I'm in, we're in large-scale land development, mostly doing master plan communities, but also doing some substantial commercial development. But we're actually a really small firm, so we don't have a lot of employees, so we're certainly not the party that's driving the solution to a lot of this. But we do employ people that employ a substantial number of people in the form of our contractors and others. And we can also, at some point, talk about things that are starting to happen in that world with labor shortages and whatnot. The other piece is that for 2 years, and I'm the immediate past chair of Greater Phoenix Leadership, which is the large CEO group in town. So indirectly, I have been doing lots of thinking about this whole employment issue with everybody in Phoenix. And then lastly, near and dear to my heart, I have 3 kids that are 27, 24, and 16. So we're seeing this whole thing shake out in our own household with my own kids and their friends. So that also is really brought a lot of attention to what I think is going on in the area. The big thing I talked about, from my perspective and being in the business I'm in, is the cyclicality and volatility of our economy here, where from 2006, especially 2008, we lost about 300,000 jobs. So like always, we were pretty much the first to fail. But in this case, Phoenix is normally the first one to recover, but we did not this time. We were really the last to recover almost in the whole country. And we just now have recovered the last of the full 300,000 jobs that we lost in the downturn. And I think that's what's made me particularly attentive to, isn't there maybe a better way to skin this cat? And so there was several years ago, Brookings did a study across the United States and really looked at the fact that where the most economic development would happen in the future is not at a federal level, not at a state level, but really at a local level, and especially in many of the big metro areas, Phoenix being one of them. So they put together a thing called the Metropolitan Business Plan that was first launched in the Maricopa Association of Governments and was looked at and worked on there. The decision was made to move it into a more business-centric area, so it was moved to GPEC, which is the Greater Phoenix Economic Council. And at there, we launched and renamed it Velocity, and I became the interim chair with the idea of how to birth it and even remove it from GPEC at some point. That has happened now, so at this point, we have a permanent board. We're now located at SkySong, which is ASU's facility on McDowell and Scottsdale Road. We were funded for 3 years to really launch it. And we've actually now renamed it from Velocity to Partnership for Economic Innovation. And the reason for that is we feel Velocity is a component of a broader subject, but it's not the end-all to it. So have changed it in that sense. And as I said, it started really as the Metropolitan Business Plan. As everybody's saying here, I care dearly about workforce development and business readiness and the pipeline that we're developing and the stuff that we're seeing with GPEC and others. Probably the biggest concern of people is if they relocate to Phoenix or if they grow in Phoenix, is there going to be an adequate workforce to basically support their business or industry? And I think it's something that's worthwhile being concerned about. The other couple things are that basically there's 3 main strategies for Velocity, and the first is to create a world-class capacity and talent for continuous innovation in the next generation technologies for advanced industries and emerging sectors. The second strategy is enhance the innovation ecosystem and built environment for firms to start up and scale up, and these are all kind of things to hopefully change the volatility of our economy. And then the third is an export strategy, which we've already launched and put into a better home than the one that we started with. There's a nice, robust website for Velocity. If you want to see more and see some of the studies and the work we're doing. But if I had to ultimately kind of dig down into some other numbers that I think what we're trying to avoid in the future, and I think this whole subject will help address that, is when we got our 300,000 jobs back, that the average salary, if you take the aggregated amount of those, is about 15.9% less than the 300,000 we lost. And we have a average wage in Phoenix that's not recovering, which has all sorts of adverse consequences. And then the other number I'd like to throw out is that our advanced industries, which is one of our strategies to build those, that we were about 25% of our workforce was advanced industry jobs in 1985. Today it's about 12 or 13%. And again, I look at it as a problem, but also as a great area for potential and for growth. So long and short is that I think, like a lot of things, you can just rest on your laurels, hope things are like they used to be, which is that we have bad downturns and they bounce back. But the bottom line is that we have been mostly a consumption-based economy. I think we're very, very vulnerable to the cyclicality and the volatility, and that we need to make a very conscious effort within how we drive our own economy and the business plan that we can choose to develop, that words I use are aspirational and intentional, that I think if we focus on it, we definitely can get there, but without doing so, I think we're destined to repeat the negative things that we have historically gone through in the downturns. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. And Delia.
Great. Good morning. On behalf of Wal-Mart and the Wal-Mart Foundation, it's really a pleasure to be with you this morning and to share with you what we're doing to improve career opportunity and career pathways in our own company, in the retail sector at large, and in adjacent sectors. And first of all, I want to say just something about retail jobs. And retail jobs are not going away. The reality is that they may look different 5, 10, 20 years from now, but as long as people continue to need food and baby formula and clothes and big screen TVs and laundry detergent and anything else that you need, there's going to be a need for businesses to provide those services and those products and to fill those needs. So the big question is, how do we make retail jobs meaningful? And education, training, pathways are all part of that answer, and that's why we're so proud to be a sponsor of this program, the Southwest Pathways Conference, that convenes folks who are talking about these issues and in the space, and that are exactly the individuals to help answer the question and meet the challenge. So, in retail jobs is really a very broad definition. In fact, most of the time folks might think about your customer-facing types of jobs in the store, and that's true. Those are a lot of the kinds of jobs that we have, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about this morning is focused on the pathways for careers inside our stores and operations. But, I'll tell you, I was just I have a 4-year-old, and I was at her preschool a couple of weeks ago. It was talk about have moms and dads come and talk about their jobs week. And I came in and I talked about Wal-Mart. And one of the little 4-year-olds very astutely noticed and noted that she says, "You work at Wal-Mart, but I don't see you in the stores." And I said, well, that's actually a very good comment. That's very astute from a 4-year-old, because I don't work in the stores, and there's such a range of jobs at Walmart that are beyond the customers facing positions and that require the skills if we're going to continue to grow and if we're going to continue to open stores. And we have 5,000 stores across the country, and we need to be able to fill the jobs that come open, and also to fill jobs when we're adding 2,000 to 3,000 jobs a year when we open stores. So there's definitely a need for us. And so as the largest retailer in the world with more than 2.2 million associates worldwide, it's incumbent on us to first look at how we can improve career opportunity and career pathways in our own company. And as it is, no other company in America, I think, provides the kind of opportunity that Walmart does. From the beginning, Walmart's been a company where you can go as far as your hard work and your interests and your talent will take you. You don't need an advanced degree to make a good living or even a great living at Walmart. And I think, Sandra, you mentioned that a quarter of the jobs don't require a bachelor's degree or something below a bachelor's degree. And so there is a great opportunity at Walmart to be able to find meaningful career opportunities and be successful. My own husband, for example, started at Walmart 26 years ago, and he just completed his associates a couple years ago. It was because of his hard work, his talent, his interest in succeeding that got him there. And so that's been the story of Walmart. It's as true today as it was in 1962 when Sam Walton founded the company. And that's why I can tell you that more than 75% of our store management teams started in hourly positions. They ascended through the ranks because of their hard work, because of their commitment to our core beliefs, not because they had the right degree or the right pedigree, but because they believed in the company and had an attitude of customer service and of striving for excellence and respect for the individual and acting with integrity. And in fact, our own CEO, Doug McMillon, started his career at Walmart unloading trucks. So he's setting a great example of the kind of opportunity that you can find in our company. But where are we going as a company? What is the future of retail? How can we ensure that more associates have that same kind of opportunity to go as high as they want in the company and as fast as they want to go? These are questions that were drivers behind our announcement last year that we will be investing $2.7 billion in wages, training, and education for our own associates. So again, as the largest retailer in the world, what are we doing to take care of our own associates and create those career pathways? We also, so what does that $2.7 billion look like? It means investment in wages. So we just increased wages for 1.2 million U.S. associates in February. We launched a Pathways training program, which will provide clear career paths for associates. In February, so just a couple of months ago, we debuted our first academy for frontline supervisors, where they will acquire core retail knowledge regarding how to manage their department, which I'll tell you, when you're a department manager at Walmart, you're managing a multi-million-dollar business. So that's a pretty good career path, and they need the knowledge and the skills to be able to manage a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The academy will teach them how to lead their people, how to meet customers' needs. Because of our size and the scope of our business, we're also in a unique position to help impact the world around us for good. And how we approach that global responsibility is really summed up in two words, and that's shared value. That means we help create whole systems change. That's part of the conversation that we're involved in today. We create shared value for business and society. We lead through the business. We draw on our unique capabilities as a retailer. We use philanthropy to complement business initiatives and go beyond what business can do. And we collaborate with others. So one manifestation of our shared value approach is that's particularly relevant to the conversation today is our $100 million investment and commitment to accelerating mobility in retail beyond Walmart. So there's what we're doing for our own associates, and then externally in the retail sector and adjacent sectors. And in 2015, Walmart and the Wal-Mart Foundation announced a commitment of $100 million to explore and implement innovations in pre-employment training, advancement, employer practices, tools and technology to make it easier and faster for people to advance in retail and adjacent sectors. So to date, we've awarded $39 million of the $100 million of that initial commitment. That includes a recently announced $10.9 million grant to the Chicago Cook County Workforce Partnership, $5.5 million grant to the Aspen Institute that was announced last month, and a combined $16 million to 7 nonprofits that are committed to this work as well. So the bottom line is that Walmart and the Wal-Mart Foundation are committed to creating economic opportunity and career pathways for our associates, as well as retail workers in general and workers in adjacent sectors. So I look forward to the conversation. I think there's a lot here for us to talk about, and look forward to the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delia, and thank you to all of our panel members. And I know time is running a little short. We've got to conclude this session by noon. So we'll get started right with some questions that I have, but we certainly want this to be an interactive panel discussion, so we would love to hear your questions. So I'll get started with a few questions that I have, but as you have questions, let's make sure that you get those questions to the folks that are walking around so that we can make sure that your questions are answered as part of this panel discussion. I think the first thing I'd like to say is, number one, congratulations to all of you on this panel, the commitment that you are making to ensure that we've got talent, the right talent to supply the future employer needs is really quite remarkable. And the investment numbers that I'm hearing from those of you just on the panel, there's a considerable amount of activity going on with employers in our country. And we're seeing true partnerships and collaboration with educational partners and solution providers to ensure that we have the right talent to compete effectively worldwide. But clearly, we still have this significant skills gap. And so employers are at the table, educational and solution training providers are all at the table, and everyone's having a very robust conversation. But what I'd love to hear from all of you is, now that we've got the right people at the table and there's commitment on all sides, and we still have a significant misalignment of skills for the needs of the future, can we talk very specifically, and maybe it's just one or two examples that are relevant to your particular area? When we say skills gap, what are we talking about specifically? What are the skills that specifically employers are looking for so that we can begin to ensure that we've got the right talent for those employers? And Curtis, I'll start with you if that's okay.
Thank you. Well, I'll just speak directly from the clients that I talk to all the time. And I mean, it's been probably over the last 10 years that I hear the same feedback. I talked about some of the survey data that we mentioned, but a lot of the middle market companies in this country, manufacturers, distributors, I mean, they are looking for what I would define as middle skilled jobs. So think of welders, think of other technical sort of training jobs, whether it's truck drivers, huge shortage in that. We mentioned construction in terms of, again, sort of the some technical skills that are required there, that there's significant shortages. So, you know, I think that primarily to me is an area where, as a society, I think we have to ask ourselves, you know, if we're talking to, you know, our friends and families in the community, and we really want to promote a variety of pathways, you know, we have to, I think, get away from this notion that if someone says, you know, I don't want to go to college, but I want to get this technical skill, and I want to be a plumber, and I want to be a, you know, technician here and there, that's not a stigma. That we don't look down on people that for some reason choose a pathway that provides them, you know, a different skill that maybe perhaps isn't the same pathway as some of us have gone. But that, to me, as I'm out talking to our clients and asking them their needs, it really is these jobs that require some sort of training that isn't always from a four-year institution. And it's very technical in nature and has an immediate need for. So that's from, you know, my perspective on that.
And Bob, can you talk specific about the healthcare?
Yeah, I think in healthcare, and some of this is a little bit, I think, getting back to that advertising thing I talked about earlier, and a campaign we had where we sent our employees out. Who in high school has any idea what a respiratory therapist is, or an occupational therapist, or a dietitian? I think there's a big opportunity, maybe it's in the traditional counseling functions and all those kinds of things, is how do you make people aware of what some of these opportunities are? What do they pay? Because there's some very, very high-paying two-year degree jobs in healthcare that a lot of people don't know exist. So I think there's this opportunity again, for businesses to work with educational endeavors to truly try to make sure people understand what those options are, and then obviously then what kind of training do you need for those types of jobs. So that's been the big challenge for healthcare, is a lot of people don't know what these jobs are. Because, when you talk to some kid about being a biomedical engineer, and, this is really cool, you get to open up and play inside a $2.5 million MRI, they kind of get excited about that. But if you tell them, a biomedical engineering, it's kind of like, what's that? So I think there's a real opportunity for that educational perspective, because I think a lot of people just don't know what those opportunities are.
Thank you. Becca, based on your national work, I'm sure you're getting a lot of feedback.
Well, the skills will definitely vary, of course, by industry and even by company. And I'm going to dare say soft skills. I know no one likes it, but you know exactly what I'm saying when I say it. So I'm going to say those soft skills, right? You hear about this need for a T-shaped professional. What exactly are the skills that are needed? I like to look to the market because the market is actually very telling about what is going on and what employers are wanting. Recently, I had a conversation with Brian Craig from University Ventures, as well as Krista here from Fullbridge. And what you really see is there's this network, this subsector, what I call like pre-hire training, that is occurring to really fill the gap. This is not, of course, a 4-year degree or even a 2-year degree, but to say there's this gap between what's coming out of sort of educational workforce systems and what is needed for employment. And usually it's just that extra bump, right? But it's so closely aligned with what employers need that you have all of these companies coming in and saying, hey, well, if they're willing to, pay a premium, you said hospitals are willing to pay more to get, the nurses they want. If they're willing to pay a premium, heck, they can pay me that premium, and I can go ahead and get the training these people need that is directly aligned to employers. So for me, it's paying attention to that subsector that's cropping up, because it'll really kind of give you an idea of what is directly aligned to employers.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. We certainly heard on the last panel, and then this one, I think the issue of just can't we all show a little love for the alternative education that's out there, which I think is a big deal. And even with GPL, Great Phoenix Leadership, we have been champions of education for a long time, but really focusing on P20 without probably sufficient focus on the CET options. But now to see what Bill Simons and Doug Pruitt and a bunch of others are doing in that area to really expand that opportunity for others and really expose it as a great alternative, I think is good. And then one thing we certainly saw this year is really the first education victory in the legislative session this year was the restoration of funding for CTE. So I think that we're starting to see that whole movement is picking up steam and finally getting the respect and that it needs, and what a great alternative it is for so many people to fill great jobs in the workforce.
Thank you.
I think I want to underscore the point that Erica made about soft skills, and in our sector, in the retail sector, I think that's so important. I mean, we've always said at Wal-Mart that if someone can come to us with a passion for customer service, with good decision-making skills, with being on time, those sorts of skills, if they come to us, we can teach them retail. We can teach them the mechanics of the business. And we have programs in place to do that, and mentoring and other ways that we can help someone become a good merchant and a good retailer. But we do need them to come to us with that passion for the job and with a certain work ethic and those soft skills. So I'd like to underscore the point that Erica made about the importance of that function.
Perfect. And I'd like to continue this conversation, and if I hear questions, please raise your hand or let me know. I don't know if we're accepting cards, but I want to build on something, Bob, you mentioned, because you talked about educating and communicating more effectively what positions are available, and better understanding what those positions. And so I'd like to ask each of you, and I'll start over on this side with Delia first, perhaps, is how has your interface with high schools, community colleges, and universities evolved over the last decade? There's obviously a substantial amount of work that employers need to do with the educational institutions and training providers. And so give us a few examples of what Wal-Mart is doing in that area.
She throws a hard question to me first, right? I think it's certainly evolved over time. Obviously, these are places where we recruit and for different types of jobs. As I mentioned earlier, when you come to Walmart, there's a range of jobs that you can go into. So on the one hand, we're working with Midwestern University here and others in recruiting pharmacists. But then we're also engaged in recruiting for entry-level positions and trying to communicate what are those needs. I just talked about some of those soft skills that you need to bring to the business that you sort of need to have as a baseline that we can then teach you the business of retail. So it's really an ongoing conversation, and I think the Wal-Mart Foundation is really much more engaged now in that conversation overall of how do we help solve for this problem? How do we help solve for X and for Y and be a part of the solution? So it's no longer just funding programs that work, and other organizations that will work with the high schools and with colleges and with other training institutions. It's being a part of that integration and that shared value that I talked about, and how do we approach it in a very integrated manner so that we're directly creating that value with them and collaborating. We're not just funding it, so we're not just the third party funding it, but we're really part of that conversation. So that's really an evolution of where we've been in our relationship and where we are now. Again, looking at that shared value. Excellent, thank you.
So when I talked about pipeline, I think that can be a lot of different things, but one of the ones that I'm concerned about kind of this area, and I'll use a specific example, is that the coding academy that's going to be opened at Central High School this coming year is something that I think we're all concerned that if kids aren't reading by the third grade, they're going to start to fall behind, and can they ever catch up? But now we've got the issue with the coding academy where they're generally concerned that they can even fill the seats because they have not been able to introduce kids in the elementary school and middle school to even what it is or why it's a good option. So I think that we have to remember in all these things that it's a long continuum and it's a marathon, and that you can't forget that when you do something in one part of the system, you got to go all the way up and down the ladder to really make it functional. So that would be just a concern I would throw out as to how strong is the continuum to make sure all this stuff really works.
Excellent, thank you.
And employers are also getting quite innovative in how they're interacting with students. I think we sometimes get stuck on internships and place-based as the only way of doing things, and they're fantastic and great. But then you have employers coming to us and saying, the dynamics of the workplace that allow us to innovate and compete have significantly changed. No longer are we working in silos, but we have people working in cross-functional teams now, right? So it's the engineers working with the design artists, et cetera. Then you look back at your P through 20 system, and it doesn't mirror that at all. I mean, you do see little projects crop up here and there, but it's still very much you teach one subject and you go forward with it. Virginia Chamber, for example, Virginia Chamber of Commerce was like, okay, well, how can I tackle this issue as a solution for my membership? And what they're doing is launching this series of innovation challenges. One, it allows you to touch a high volume of students within a short period of time. Two, it exposes students to so many careers in different angles. And three, it really does get at that idea that innovation has changed and we need to make sure we are changing our projects to do it in a similar manner. And for the students, when you think about it, I don't know if you guys remember your internships, on our resume we said, oh yeah, we did so much, when actually what we really did the entire time was file things away, right? Like, let's be honest. However, when you talk about these innovation challenges, they can now go to an interview and they can say, hey, like this is what I did, here's a challenge I faced, here's the role I played, and actually have a tangible portfolio to share with the employer in a different way than basically, saying you did something a little bit more, grand than you actually did there. So again, they're looking at different ways that they could also engage youth.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think it's the same thing I've been talking about, this working with the educational entities. So I have the opportunity to sit on an advisory capacity for the Arizona State University School of Healthcare Solutions. And so it's always very interesting because if you know anything about ASU, they're very innovative, which means they have a lot of different titles and degrees and so forth. But the real issue is what do you want to buy? That's what they're asking us. So for example, one that just sticks in my mind very clearly is their nursing school wanted to develop a nurse practitioner level degree in care coordination. Well, in the real world, the top end, anybody is paying at that is a RN, and most of them are not. It's primarily an administrative job. So you're creating something that nobody wants to buy in healthcare. And so we're able to give them very hands-on, this is not an appropriate level, because the differential in cost between a nurse practitioner and RN is about $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So you can't afford people to do that. And I think there are just numerous examples of that. I talked earlier about, we got very involved in the design of the curriculum in that nursing program I described with Grand Canyon, because again, we didn't like what we were getting, so to speak, in terms of buying, so we had a lot of input in the curriculum itself. And I think that's where, if we can get the educational entities, whether it's the universities, the high schools, community colleges, to work with the business, I think you get a much better product, and one that we very much want to employ and recruit.
Thank you.
Knock over this water.
So at JP Morgan, we have a very large, diverse employee base, almost 250,000 employees across the globe. So very diverse in terms of skill sets and things that we look for. I guess the one comment I'll make, though, as we think about how things have evolved, we spend $10 billion a year on technology, which is roughly about 10% of our top-line revenue. I don't think a lot of people think of us that way. I think they think of a bank and kind of, stodgy, conservative, just giving people money. But we really view ourselves as innovators in driving technology in terms of providing better ways for you to access your money, doing it mobile, whether it's also virtually. I know branches are still around, but there's ways to get even your money faster, quicker out of a branch. Security, obviously, is a huge issue. And, we spend upwards of, $600 million a year in cybersecurity. So as you think about how the banking industry is evolving, and we're looking at ourselves as wanting to be leaders in terms of innovation, we're looking for employees, obviously, that, fit that category. And it's to the point where, you think about how the banking industry kind of got beat up going through the downturn. And you think about, the new millennials and kind of what really is interesting to them, and it's less so about how much money I can make, but, how can I save the world? And so, we're promoting ourselves as how do we, as an institution, be a part of that innovation and drive and help, deliver, a new age of banking. And so we're promoting ourselves on campus that way and trying to get people to think of us, again, as a technology company more than a bank. And I have to say, locally, just to give a shout out to Year Up, we were talking about soft skills. Here locally, we support Year Up, which is a fabulous organization providing, great tools and capabilities to young adults to help them, through different pathways, whether it's education or getting a job. And that's a great partnership for us. And we have interns from Year Up, and some of them are walking around, some of the young adults you see getting questions. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Year Up, because I think that's a fabulous organization and a good way for us to get the future employees here locally.
Excellent, thank you. And to build on that question, we have a question from one of our participants in the audience who wants to know from the employers here, how do we get the conversation going? As a community college, what can we do to get the conversation going with employers? We talked about how employers are reaching out to high schools and colleges to engage them, but if you're a college, how are you to approach the employers and actually have a conversation that will lead to sort of some meaningful results? So I'll leave that to anyone on the panel who wants to start that conversation.
I'm happy to take this quickly. So I came from a meeting before this with ASU that they had called to bring several people together, and it sounds kind of like Bob Meyer's conversation of them saying, here's a bunch of degree programs we're delivering, here's some that are doing well, here's some where, frankly, we're having big changes in enrollment, and basically reach out and say, what's relevant, what do people want, what degrees will people sign up for? So I think the long and short is that this relationship of people wanting to know what they can do better, faster, quicker, and service basically the customer and figure out how to actually deliver something to them that's of value. I know that they're, ASU for sure, but I think for probably anybody else, they're dying to know what we all think is a marketable talent or education path for them. So I think it's just the old issue. We got to find the way and the time to share the knowledge.
Excellent.
And I'll add to that, because we're very interested in getting the conversation going. And in fact, here in Phoenix, we're going to be doing something very similar to what we've done in Chicago with the Chicago grant that I mentioned earlier, and with the Aspen Institute, we're interested in getting the conversation going here in the Phoenix market, and working with the Center for the Future of Arizona and others to make grants to talk about how do we continue this conversation and really make a difference and collaborate to have an impact on this space and create opportunity and career pathways for youth here in the Phoenix area. So how do we get the conversation going? Keep connecting, and I'm happy to provide some contact information for who could best answer the question and be your contact.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I'd be curious how you guys right now are starting to get things going. I've been recently very interested and intrigued in learning more about the idea of having employer account managers that are situated either within a school or within a university. And these are things, if you guys do contracts with companies, there's someone who's going to call you all the time, who's going to make sure you're satisfied, right? They want your business. They see you as their primary customer. And again, it gets at that shared value she was talking about. By serving business well, you can also serve the youth and young adults in your target population well at the exact same time. But it requires people dedicated to really being that account manager in a different way that I think has been done in the past. So it's something that I'm thinking about exploring. If it's something of interest to you, please, drop by your car. I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Well, having lived it, I can tell you that there's nothing like a good crisis that gets you to work together. When we were short 2,000 nurses a year graduating, we had huge vacancy rates, we had a crisis, so it made us work very closely together. But it was interesting as you get into it. You also have to find, the cultures that click, the same innovation, et cetera. There was a reason why we did that nursing program with Grand Canyon. It was a leadership issue. The dean of nursing that was there at that point in time, we knew well, it was a very innovative, very creative place. In all honesty, both the University of Arizona and ASU turned us down because they didn't want, at the time, our input in the curriculum, et cetera, which was part of the deal. So I think, again, it's a trial and error, but there's nothing like a good crisis to get you to work together. But I would say look for those partners, and the community colleges here have been tremendous. Because again, we're very close to them because of that recruitment process. But find that innovative leader, and you can be surprised, because once you get one done, the rest of them are easy. Because every time we want to do a nursing program now, everybody's lined up at the door. And so it's different now than it once was. The first one was the hard one.
Did you have anything to add? I've got...
The only thing I guess I would add, because I think your question was how do we get sort of the constituents together to solve this issue, and it's about communication. And I mean, at the end of the day, when I think about businesses and how they innovate and advance, they find ways to solve a need that isn't quite being solved. And I think there's this ability for educators, employers, employees to do that same thing. And it's about asking, what are some of the things that we need as a business, if you're a business owner, and how do you directly solve that, whether that's through training, whether that's through collaboration with community colleges, universities. But I think much more of that is needed because, again, I think there's just, people going in different directions. Employers saying, I can't find the right job, but they're not being part of the solution. Or they can't find the right employee and they're not being part of the solution. So I think, again, it's just broad community communication.
Excellent, thank you. And we have 1 minute left, but we have a question from an audience member that I think would be a great closing question. So we have 1 minute, so I'd love to work through the panel very, very quickly. If you can just give me your final thoughts as quickly as possible. But the question is, what is one misperception about young talent that needs to be addressed with employers? Something that you've learned in your work others should know. So again, a misperception of young talent. And so we'll do kind of a rapid fire if we could just do a real quick response to this, and I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll just go first.
Go ahead.
I think there's probably a misconception that young talent is, because they potentially do things differently, that somehow they're not efficient, not as engaged. I know for me coming up, it was about face time. You know, be in the office from 8 to 9, whatever. You never left before your boss. You're there before your boss. And it's just a different way. And we're much more of a technologically friendly economy now in terms of BlackBerries. And so I think the younger generation has become more adept at doing business remotely and doing it differently. And I think we need to sort of embrace that to some degree, but just as long as the work gets done is kind of my my motto.
Yeah, just real quick, the misperception I would say out there is that the millennials aren't as motivated, et cetera, by work and that kind of thing, which I don't believe is true. I actually think they're got a better life balance than many of us had. We perceive it because we don't see things quite the same way. So I think you just have to accept the fact, and it's a big deal for us in healthcare.
I would just say that there's a misconception that the best talent only comes from these Title IV, I guess, institutions. And I love community college, and I love, higher ed in generally, but if we can open up our definition of post-secondary, particularly when it comes to thinking about opportunity youth, I think there's great talent to be captured there.
Excellent, thank you. John?
I think that we think that the people who are working for us are young, no less than they do. I think one thing that we really do is stifle innovation. And I think to let people give them the ability to spread their wings and show you what they know and show you what they can do is a great lesson for all of us.
And I'd say that I think the misperception that we fight against is that someone is too young to take on big responsibilities. And as I mentioned earlier, you can be a department manager at Walmart, manage a multi-million-dollar business. You could be 23, 24, 26, 42. I mean, and so it's really about what you bring to the table and how quickly you can learn the business to be entrusted with that responsibility. You're not too young to have big responsibility at Walmart.
Excellent. And so with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for this last hour, and we'll give our panel a round of applause. Thank you.